But first, I want to tell you a couple of things about what's going to be happening after today's session on modern help design, building a custom help site with MadCap Flare. First, we are going to be recording this session today, so you will receive a follow-up link with a link to watch the recording at your convenience following the presentation today. In that email, there's also going to be some additional resources that Quentin is going to be covering today that you can go and review at your own convenience. And we are going to be taking questions and answers throughout this session. We should have time towards the end to get to some of them. So you can feel free to use the GoToWebinar console that is a part of your screen and part of the viewing console with the application. And you can chime in with your questions throughout the presentation. I'll be flagging them so we can go back and answer them after the fact. I do want to also highlight that we're going to be talking about some discounts on training as well as MadWorld towards the end of the session, so stay tuned to the end for that as well. But without further ado, let me introduce someone who I actually met at MadCap a few months back, and I'm very happy to be introducing today for this webinar given through Prezi, Mr. Quentin Lawman from OverDrive. Quentin.
Thank you, Jose. Like you said, I'm Quentin Lawman. I am kind of a friendly technical communicator. I've been doing it for around 8 years, and I work for a company called OverDrive. We are a digital content distributor, which means we provide ebooks, audiobooks, movies, things like that to libraries and schools all around the world. We have about 2.5 million titles in our catalog right now and partner with around 90% of the libraries in the United States. So chances are, if you live in the U.S., you can probably go to your library and use our services to get free books, ebooks. We operate in more than 50 countries, so what I'm getting at is we have a really wide audience and a really big net to cast when trying to create support materials. Which leads me to our help site. Before I get into how we built our new help website, I would like to go over a little bit about where we came from. We started with text-only FAQs. There weren't any pictures. It was a very archaic, kind of old-fashioned layout that lived in individual text files on each of our digital library collection websites. So each library partner has its own website you can go to get content. That's where the FAQs lived. They were kind of buried, and they were really hard to maintain. From there, we moved on to what we called Help 2.0, which was its own standalone web portal that we linked to from all of our partner websites. We wrote the content for that in individual Word documents, one document per help article, and we ran them through a program called Word Cleaner, which basically takes the really kind of terrible HTML you get out of Word by default and converted it into much cleaner, usable HTML that we could then push to the web. This was much better, but it was limited. We couldn't do anything interactive, so if we wanted drop-down menus, forget it. Thumbnails, anything like that. Any of the functionality you'd come to expect on a modern website, it just wasn't there. We could do basic text with basic images, and we couldn't even put images in a grid pattern if we wanted to. So that got us investigating better authoring tools, which led to Help 3.0, which is a very original and exciting name. We used Flare as our publishing and compiling tool to build the website. When we were looking, we knew that we needed something that could give us usable HTML, preferably HTML that was fully HTML5 and CSS3 capable, meaning we could make it look good, make it modern. So that's kind of where we've come from. And when we were looking to build our new website, we decided to first look around the web for inspiration, websites that do things particularly well. We purposely did not look at just knowledge base or help websites. We didn't limit it because we knew that any website that's good at presenting information would be an excellent thing to kind of copy for our own help website. So I've chosen 3 of the ones we looked at. We looked at a whole bunch to kind of talk to you about today. First, we looked at Google support sites, which I'll show you in a moment. They're really simple and straightforward. There's no distractions there. It's just clean help. That's all that's there. There's nothing to pull you away. We used Chipotle's website because Chipotle is awesome and we like burritos, but it also is a very well-designed website. It's modern, it's got a lot going on, but the information delivery is actually very good. Code Academy is another one we used, which is very, if you've never heard of it, it's a very interactive website that kind of guides you through how to write code. I use it myself, and I've used it to learn some HTML and CSS tricks that have helped me a lot in my current role. And it's very user-guided, get you from point A, not knowing how to write HTML, to point B, knowing the basics of how to create a web page. And it's very good at taking you down that journey. Just to give you an idea, I'll show you those websites now. So this right here is the Google support. And you can see when you load it up, you'll first see this getting started with Gmail thing. This is the Gmail help, obviously. So we liked this because it's very simple and straightforward. There's not a lot going on here except the delivery of information, which is very important for a help site. Obviously, a lot of your audience is going to be frustrated, and you guys know this, but you don't want a frustrated person to get more frustrated because they're having trouble finding the information. So if you need to know how to switch to Gmail from your current provider, you click that button, and you're taken to a series of articles. You know, oh, I need to know how to import my email and contacts. There's the article. It's nice, it's simple, it's straightforward. It gets you the information you need with no frills. It still looks pretty, but it's not over the top. Speaking of looking pretty, this is Chipotle's website. Their landing page is here. There's not a ton of information there, but it's got graphics, it's colorful, it's not overloading you with stuff. It hides the extra information you don't necessarily need to see until you decide, hey, I want to see this. And that's when it pops up. So if I click on Food with Integrity, for example, you've got this little notebook here saying, hey, this is the basis of what we want to know, of what we want you to know when we say we serve food with integrity. Now, if you want to know more, you've got all these little interactive pop-outs, thus hiding the information you don't need, but presenting it in such a way that if you want to learn more, you can. This here is Code Academy. This is the landing page after you sign in. So you can see I'm 36% of the way through this particular set of lessons, and if I hit continue, it'll take me through my course, just like you'd take an online course. It also develops, it also tells you what other classes are offered, so you can quickly learn how to make a Relic application, which is in beta, or you can learn JavaScript or jQuery. All of these things are very handy when you're learning how to code, obviously. So we liked this a lot because it's a very, very guided journey, and we want to do, at some point, something a little bit more interactive that gets our users from point A, I want to read a book, to point B, reading that book after I borrowed it from my library. So these are some of the inspirations we took, and again, I wanted to show them to you because I wanted to impress the idea that you don't need to just look at knowledge bases. In fact, you shouldn't. Is any delivery information method that's good will work for a help site, probably, with some tweaks. So that all brings me to the foundation of the project, things you need to think about before you actually start building the project. The very first thing I can tell you is to get into a web-first state of mind. What I mean by that is your content and your development and your team all need to be centered around building a website, not necessarily building solely help content. So when you're creating the content, it needs to be short, sweet, and built for the web. The reason for that is people are goldfish. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression, but it essentially means that when people see something they're interested in, some shiny object, they go look at it, and if they catch another shiny project out of the corner of their eye until they look at that too, and so on and so forth. They have short attention spans, and the internet is the playground for people with short attention spans. They will go and leap from subject to subject as fast as they can because the internet provides an almost infinite amount of subjects. So you've got to fight that goldfish instinct by creating content that delivers the information quickly and efficiently and in a visually appealing way. We did that with bite-sized, non-sequential articles. So it's not like writing a paper guide where you generally have like a getting started section followed by, setup and then installation and so on and so forth. It's more of a, here's a general getting started guide that links you out to 3 other guides that tell you how to do more specific things. It's all about efficient information delivery and keeping each individual article as concise as possible. I might be preaching to the choir here, but this framework and this web-first state of mind is very important. We did not just take printed materials and convert them into and put them up on the web. The rest of the foundation has to do with your team. You're going to need one. A single technical communicator or even 3 tech writers like we have, even though our tech writers are awesome. We couldn't build this website ourselves. We needed a web developer. We also had a UI UX guy. We had a kind of back-end developer to build our own Homebrew Tool, which I'll talk more about in just a little bit. You need to build your Flared project and your team and your content with all of this stuff in mind. And just real briefly, I'll give you an example of what I mean about efficient and succinct delivery of information. So I wrote like a little tiny snippet of an article here on this slide. Everything you see that's in light blue would link to a more specific article. So this is about building a desktop computer. Say you've got a person that knows generally how to build a computer. They know what a motherboard is, a processor, and a heatsink. They know all that stuff. Well, they might just need the steps in the right order. So they're just going to read through the steps and do it all themselves because they know how to open the side of the tower or insert the motherboard. So you might have a complete novice that doesn't know how to do any of that. They might be able to figure out how to open the side of the tower, but then not know how to insert the motherboard standoffs. Well, they click the link, and then they get a specific guide centered just around inserting those standoffs. So that they get pictures and diagrams and everything they need to do it without cluttering up the main steps of the original article, which is just the general steps on how to build a computer. So again, I'm sure most of the audience knows this, but this is very important when you're considering a web-first approach like we did. So now that you've got the web-first state of mind kind of in mind, and you have your team and you know what you want to do with your content, you need to find a place where it's going to live. We did this before we even built the entire Flare project. We had a general idea of where our content was going to live. This is important because where your content is going to live will dictate how you set up your Flare project. So here's what we looked for in a home or a web host. We wanted a pre-built knowledge base or CMS. The reason for that is we wanted an off-the-shelf product that we could shove our content into without having to build a website from scratch. This would save us on development time and generally make it easy in theory to maintain, and so far it has been. It's appealing because we tech writers can worry mostly about generating our content, creating the content and displaying it the way we want to within an article, and not worry about getting a web developer to do deployments or things like that to get the website up to date. That pre-built knowledge base or CMS also needed to support full-blown CSS3 and HTML5, meaning it had to be built for the modern web. We needed something we could make responsive, something we could put graphics into, or HTML5 video, things like that. it also had to have an API or some other method to mass push content up to the site. In other words, we recently had a release with over 200 articles that needed to be updated on our live website. We use our Homebrew tool that I told you about, which again I'll talk a little bit more about in the next couple slides. We use our Homebrew tool to talk to an API to send our content up to that website. So we basically shoved all those articles up at the same time without having to do a lot of manual work to make that happen. The service had to be highly customizable, and the short version of that is we needed to make the website look the way we wanted it to look and structure it the way we wanted it to be structured. And finally, our web team, our UI UX guy and our web developer needed to have easy access to the CMS, or knowledge base in our case, to be able to modify it without needing the technical writers or the technical communicators to be in there at the same time. They don't need Flare. They can just access the website directly. They can access the HTML and CMS, the CSS that lives in the framework of our website without intervention from us. There's no deployments or anything like that. They just change it when they need to change it. We ended up using Salesforce Desk, which you can see the icon there at the bottom. It's a full support desk solution, meaning you can write emails and stuff like that to your end users, but we just use it for the knowledge base feature. It has an API that we use, which I'll talk a little bit more about soon, and you'll get information in the follow-up email after this webinar about. But it has the API we needed. It had the CSS3 and HTML5 support we wanted, so it worked for us. In theory, you should be able to use any CMS that has the features you want. So I posted a couple others on this slide, like Joomla, and the one on the bottom left is Orchard, so you can get an idea of what's out there. Those will also be on in the email you get following the webinar. So you've picked your home. You're thinking web first. What do you do to put it in Flare? Well, that really depends on your home, your host. For us, but I can tell you a little bit about what we did. So first, we don't use Flare's table of contents feature for our website, for our help website, because we have our Homebrew tool that reads the metadata in the articles that we create in Flare. So each topic in Flare has metadata that we've assigned to it, which I'll show you, I believe, in the next slide, that tells our Homebrew tool where that article lives and what category it belongs to, what are the keywords and things like that. So really we're using a combination of our Homebrew tool and the APIs to push content up to desk as a replacement for the Flare table of contents. To make up for that and to keep things organized in Flare, we use condition tags out the wazoo. We have basically a condition tag for all articles, meaning it goes both to our website and our internal support solutions. Our support solutions are what we use to send email to end users and partners that have questions when they write into our support team. We have internal only, which just goes to our support solutions, and we have external only, which just goes to our website. So we use those condition tags to help organize our targets so we know where the content is going. We also use SharePoint to kind of organize our content, meaning outside teams sometimes need to see what status an article is in, whether it's in writing, review, in QA, so on and so forth. And it also helps us keep track of our own work. Because of the way we have our Flare project set up, we found that using the third-party solution like SharePoint to help organize the content in a workflow type state was very important, and it was easier to do in SharePoint than Flare simply because of the somewhat not normal way we set up our Flare project. Flare has these organizational tools, and we did consider using the file tags, and you probably could if you were doing the same project and didn't want to use a third-party tool. We also use source control. We're set up through SVN, and we find that important to, just for bare basic workflow, but it's also one more thing to make sure the HTML is working fine and all that stuff. We use Metadata, which is probably the most important part of our automated publishing process. And what I mean by metadata is we put specific tags and information into the header of each topic in Flare, each article, to, like I said earlier, to tell our publishing tool where it needs to go. You need, when you're setting up your Flare project, no matter what route you go, and your setup might be a little different than ours, you need to remember your publishing workflow. Where is it going to go? How is it going to get there? What's your tool need to see to push that content to where it needs to live? These are the things you need to keep in mind when you're setting up Flare. So here's what it looks like. You can see our content in the Content Explorer screenshot there. Our content folder is just one big folder with article numbers in it for each topic name. So article 0001.html is article 1, which is what I'll call it from now on, because saying 3 zeros all the time gets old. So each one of those articles corresponds to a number in SharePoint, which is what we use to kind of keep track of what state those articles are in. Our header, I've taken a screenshot of our header and put it below. And I'll kind of go through that line by line and tell you why everything is in there. So first is the title block, which is kind of self-explanatory. We pull the title from the header to create our headings in Desk on our help website. The meta name description and the MadCap concept there, which are both OverDrive for Windows in this case, dictate the topic in Desk. Not to be confused with Flare topics, but basically topics in Desk are categories. So this article will go to live under the category OverDrive for Windows on our help website. Keywords are just what you think they are. They're keywords. We push those up and into the desk.com environment, and it gets attached to the article and works with the search engine there. The next two are SharePoint ID and article type. For the SharePoint ID, it says content 0001. So you'll note that that's our SharePoint number and it matches the name of the file, article 1 there at the top of the Content Explorer. So that ties the article to the SharePoint number. It helps in our organization. It also tells our Homebrew Tool which article is in the publishing list, because we get a list of articles in our Homebrew Tool that tells us what we're publishing. We can select them individually or in bulk, which is pretty nice. And I'm getting to the workflow, I promise. So the article type is, if you go to help.overdrive.com, which is our help website, and you search for something, you'll note that there's a little icon next to each article. We have 3 types of content that live on that site. We have articles, we have videos, and we have device profiles. And there's a corresponding icon for each, so that you have some idea what you're clicking on before you click it in the search results. I highlight this because it just goes to show you how powerful the metadata can be in Flare. This is HTML that lives in the header. It doesn't show up in your article body or anything like that, but it can be used to manipulate content that gets published to the web. You can put all sorts of things in here. You can call out the style guides if you want. You can put JavaScript in the header. We do that on some of our articles. And it all works great because Flare is a very, very powerful compiling engine, which is what we're using it for. And when we compile our content, it passes all that all of this header information lives in the HTML, so that we can access it using our Homebrew tool and do whatever we want with it. So it's just one more powerful thing Flare does to make this all work. It makes our lives easier, and it's much, much easier than just writing HTML pages from scratch, because we have the other features of Flare. We use Flare dropdowns and things like that that all get compiled and published when we hit that publish button in Flare. So, how do you put it all together? Well, we have a Homebrew tool, which I've been talking about, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about now, that grabs the HTML and pushes it up to the web or pushes it into Salesforce Solutions as needed. I put a little screenshot of our help website. If you haven't visited it yet, that's what it looks like. And our app is basically the connector. It accesses the Desk API, Salesforce Solutions API, SharePoint API, and our Flare project directory. When we use Flare to publish content, we do it just like you probably do if you use Flare. We build the project first, then we publish it. But instead of FTPing it up to some server somewhere, we publish it to a local directory. When we do that, we can use our Homebrew tool to comb through the HTML and read all the metadata that's in place. So all those tags I just showed you are used here to give our Homebrew tool information about the article. What type is it? What's the article number? Things like that. So after it comes through the directory, we use it to push content to Desk. So once it reads the metadata from the article, it'll grab the raw HTML from the directory, and then it'll write necessary changes to the memory. Now, what I mean by writing necessary changes to the memory is pretty simple. In Flare, if I wanted to link Article 1 and Article 2, when I look in the actual code, the link will read as 0002.html without any path or anything like that, because when you publish and compile your code, Flare generates those paths automatically. Well, our tool needs to replace that path with something that will work on Salesforce Desk, which is our help website. When you publish an article to Salesforce Desk, so if I publish Article 1 to Salesforce Desk, it will be assigned its own URL. Desk automatically generates the URLs, and we can't control it, which is one of the shortcomings of Desk, but it's got lots of other positives that we do like. No CMS or knowledge base is going to be perfect, by the way. So we publish Article 1, it gets its own URL. Well, that's great, but we need to know what that URL is so we can link to Article 1 from other articles. So when Article 1 gets published the first time, an entry is made in a map file that's associated with our Homebrew tool. Our Homebrew tool reads the map file, sees that Article 1 has been published to this specific Desk URL, and it's forever associated in the map file like that. So when there's a link to Article 1, it refers to the map file, grabs the URL from Desk, and then puts it into the HTML so that that link works properly. So that map file is very, very important. It also is very important for when we publish a new article. If we published Article 1 again, say it gets updated and we need to push the update out, that article will no longer, without the map file, that article would just get a new Desk URL. So we'd have two Article 1s living on our help website, one of which is out of date. So when we publish an article, the map file is always referenced to see if that article already exists in the map file. If it does, it pushes the content through the Desk API to Desk under the same URL, overwriting the old data, so we can update as often as we want. So that's what it does when it comes through the HTML. It checks the map file for links, existing publications, and things like that. We also push to Salesforce Solutions, which again is our internal only thing. I only highlight this because it kind of gives you an idea that you can build a Homebrew tool to read the HTML from Flare to do a whole lot of stuff, again, because the Flare output is so powerful and robust, really the possibilities are fairly, well, anything you can do with HTML you can pretty much do in Flare. If you put it in the code, it comes out in the code, and you can have a tool do whatever you want with that HTML. It's very nice. So the process for publishing the Salesforce solutions is almost identical, except it writes a little bit differently to memory and pushes it through different API, the Salesforce Solutions API. So we build our tool to talk to all these various sections, and it works pretty well for us. The real key here is, again, the metadata in Flare, a Homebrew tool that can read that metadata and know what to do with it, and the availability of APIs or some other method to push content to where you need it to go. Those are the keys to building a website like ours. There's plenty of ways to do this, but this is how it worked for us. We chose this path to keep our development to a minimum, so we wouldn't be hogging dev resources that are needed on other projects. And even with that minimal dev support, we wanted to be able to build something that looked modern, something responsive, Web 2.0, if you will. And so far it's working for us. We have plans for the future to make it even better, and it all should be possible using our Flare publishing and using our Flare authoring and compiling, and our Homebrew tool to publish up to the web. So, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jose to talk about MadWorld.
All right, thank you, Quentin. That was definitely a great presentation so far. We've got lots of questions that have come in that we'll get to very shortly. So please feel free to use that console of GoToWebinar to enter your question. But we want to talk quickly about the last of the specials that we have running for MadWorld 2015. It is again here in San Diego, and if you register by December 31st, you can get $100 off still. So definitely take advantage of that. We will have many sessions like this, as well as many more tools agnostic, MadCap, Flare, Lingo, as well as just technical communication-driven concepts at the MadWorld 2015. So definitely check out our website at madcapsoftware.com for more information and take advantage of that coupon code. So next slide, please. One last discount coupon that we can take advantage of here that we want to talk about is for some trainings that we're doing in the month of December. We have the responsive HTML5 mobile and EPUB training, as well as the Flare project management and team authoring training. You can take advantage of this. It looks like through November 14th, and this will get you $100 off these advanced training courses. So please follow up with sales@madcapsoftware.com or give us a call at our phone number there, 858-320-0387, for more information about these trainings and any additional ones that we have coming up in the very near future. So with that, we can go on to the last slide. I do want to thank Quentin again for joining us. Like I said, I met Quentin many months ago at MadCamp, and to see him out here presenting what he's learned with Flare and how to adapt it to the technologies that he already knows is quite impressive. In a very short amount of time, he's pushed Flare into places that most people don't normally take it. And so we're very happy to have this presentation going forward. But with that, Quentin, I'm going to tee up some questions for you here. And this is one, and we talked a little bit about this before, but how can you generate targets with no TOC? You mentioned that you essentially use Flare as a compiler. I know how that works, but explain your process of not using a TOC to simply use Flare as a publishing engine in that way.
Basically, we use our targets are built around the condition tags. So we have a target that I call all, a target that goes. We have an internal and external target. Sorry, and the external target grabs all the condition tags that have that are labeled as all or external, which I mentioned earlier, and publishes those out into a directory. So you can change basically we just set up the target to grab everything with that condition tag, and without a TOC, it just dumps it all into the content directory. We don't need the TOC because we don't need the Flare built TOC, I should say, because we're not using it to organize information on our website. We don't have that left nav. We don't use Flare to connect the articles to one another. So all we're looking for is getting to a target that can give us the clean HTML that's fully compiled from Flare, so we get the things like the drop-downs and whatnot that actually work.
Yeah, most people may not realize that when you build something like the HTML5 target from Flare, all of the content and the topics from the content directory of the project pass through to the output folder. There is an option in the advanced tab of the target editor, so that behavior is not the default behavior, and it's called excluding content not linked directly or indirectly to the target. But when you don't use that option, every topic from the Flare project is passed through in the output, so the use of a TOC isn't required to simply pull the HTML files in the way that you're looking to do, where you're looking to just have the compiled pages created by Flare, not using the nav structure, not using the inherent search database and other elements that Flare is going to create. But simply building an HTML5 target will pass the topics through to the output that can be picked up by an external system, like you've demonstrated.
Exactly.
All right, so next question, and there was a few different questions about SharePoint. Specifically, what version of SharePoint was this done in with you? And then what type of files were just posted to the SharePoint site? Just more elaboration on how you used SharePoint internally.
Sure, no problem. We are actually still using SharePoint 2010, I believe, and we're actually not storing any files at all on SharePoint because SharePoint's kind of slow. So we instead we just have SharePoint entries for nothing more than tracking. So in there you'll find the article number, the URL where that article lives on our help website, the Salesforce Solutions number, if there is one, so that we can find it in Salesforce Solutions if we need to. Again, that's our internal email response home, and the categories that go along with Salesforce Solutions. So, like, is it a software problem, or is it things like that are all in there. We also track who wrote it, when it was last published, who reviewed it, and things like that. So we're really only using it as a tracking tool for our content.
Okay. And we do have a lot of users that have a breadth of experience with SharePoint, and I've seen it being used in manners like you've set up, as the distribution platform, as just a storage location for shared resources. So SharePoint is still very popular and used for a lot of different things.
Right. It's basically a tool you can do anything with because it's just a database. You can shove files or content into whatever you want.
Yeah. All right, another question that came in a few different ways, so we'll try and make it broad here. The metadata and all of that meta information that's picked up by external systems. What elements of Flare was utilized in the interface of Flare, going through things like the topic properties, and what elements of that was just hard-coded by adding it to the files manually through the code editor of Flare?
Oh, we did all of the metadata tagging through the code editor directly. There are some, well, minus the condition tags. Minus the condition tags and the concepts. We kind of started off doing the concepts through the concepts panel and just moving them into the header. So we found it easiest to just code all that stuff directly. In fact, we had a whole team of people doing it because we have over 900 articles in our project at this time, and we needed all of them tagged once we were ready to start publishing and things like that. So it wasn't hard for us to actually just teach people how to put that header information in. So we had a range of my rather awesome teammates putting meta tags in there. Some of my teammates had never even looked in HTML or XML, so we found it easiest to just do it that way. And also it allows us to use just a generic name tag and things like that that Flare, I don't believe, does through the interface, but I could be wrong, Jose.
There's a few different places that you can take advantage of adding metadata, and like you mentioned, when you apply things like conditions or concepts, those also get included. So depending on how you're architecting the Flare project to be picked up by external systems, you are going to have a few different mechanisms for that process. But for the most part, the granular capabilities that you have for going and working in the code directly is what we see a lot of just metadata applications being done. So
yeah, and I will add though that everything MadCap puts in that's related to the file properties, we could pick up on with our tool if we wanted to. We just chose to do it directly through the code editor, but that's not to say you couldn't build a solution that utilizes all the various file properties and tags that you can add onto an article directly through the Flare interface. File tags get stored in the HTML, all that stuff.
Yeah, file tags and the topic properties, that topic description is what outputs as true meta information for the file level, and so that's how generally it's done. But manipulating it globally en masse is also a very popular technique. So, you know what? There's probably at least 4 or 5 people here that chimed in that they are eager to see the final product. You showed so many great examples with the Google page and the Chipotle site and kind of where you got to, or where you started from, you know, kind of idea-wise. But if you could just walk us through what the actual end result was. I think we have time, and I think that might be appropriate.
Sure. You can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, this is our help site. We built it in Desk, and we host it in Desk. We build all the content in Flare, except for the landing pages. The landing pages were built from scratch in Desk. What I mean by landing pages is this one, our videos page, this guy, and our devices page, which is here. But everything you click. Everything else was all built in Flare. So if I go to this Getting Started article, for example, this is Flare output that we shoved into the Desk content up through the Desk content API. So you can see that like these right here are Flare dropdowns that we simply styled with CSS. So this was put in using the standard Flare UI to make a drop-down list, and we've styled them to link to our various articles and things like that. So this is what we ended up with. The search engine here, so like if I wanted to look up some information about audiobooks, and I could type, we could, you know, we use Desk's built-in search engine because that's what we needed to do with Desk. It's a limitation, again, with Desk that you can't really customize the search engine a whole lot, but it works for us, and it highlights things just like Flare search can do. And these are those article icons I was talking about. Let's see if I got a video in my search results. I should have searched for something that I knew we'd get a video. But anyway, these change based on what you're looking for and what the content is. Again, called out with the meta tags. And you can see like our articles are all pushed in here. This area here is where the actual Flare content is. This top nav and this bit here with the print icon and the breadcrumbs, that's all built in Desk. So is the categories list and this side navigation here. This is built through the topics that we set up in Flare, so the MadCap concept is built using this, the related articles. And yeah, I guess that's the basic tour, unless somebody wants to see something else specific.
No, that was a great overview. Just getting a highlight for people that haven't navigated from our customer samples page, or maybe didn't read the case study where this was featured earlier this year. It's a great way to see the final product of what you were able to create. So next question, version control. Everybody's always concerned with the redundancy and security that versioning your content can provide. How did versioning or backing up your content work into your process in any way?
Well, we pretty much rely on the SVN for that, our source control server. We have that set up on a network, basically a network storage solution that gets redundant backups and things like that. But additionally, the SVN would allow us to step back in time on each file if we needed to. So that's really been our primary source for version control. We just let the SVN do it automatically for us, and that has worked for us so far.
All right. Next question. It was more about some of the limitations that you've talked about on the desk side, and this is something that I've encountered in quite a few different ways with quite a few different systems. But at some point, the style sheet and the settings for formatting get taken over from the Flare project by an external system like the desk.com. So can you just elaborate on how you approached unifying the content on the source side from Flare with the styling that's built into these integrated systems?
Well, that's an excellent question and something I meant to bring up. I apologize. We did that by simply coming to terms with the fact that the CSS on the desk system was always going to be the source of truth, so to speak. It's always going to be the one that works. So instead of doing all of our CSS work in Flare, we did it all on desk. So through the desk admin side of things, you can create style sheets and things like that and templates and experiment with them as you want. When we got the CSS the way we wanted it, we pulled that down from desk and put it into Flare. We've had a few problems getting it to work properly in Flare, but the important thing is that all of the CSS on our website works. Because we are using an API to publish, we're able to publish an article and then within a few seconds check to make sure it looks okay. So so far that has worked very well, and the CSS on desk doesn't seem to change or anything like that. Our tool also does not grab any CSS from the Flare project. We're only taking the HTML and pushing it up to the site. We did that again to avoid conflicts with the CSS on desk. So if our web developers went in and changed something, for instance, we just restyled this header here a little bit in these icons. If he goes in and changes something, then we're not pushing old CSS from Flare up to the site and risking conflicts there. So again, we pretty much just use the CSS directly on desk to get around that problem.
Great. Yeah, the styling has to come from somewhere, and generally in external systems like desk.com, we also see it in tools like WordPress or Drupal that have their own built-in mechanism for inheritance and applying styles from a style sheet from that site infrastructure being referenced by that site. The style sheet from Flare loses priority in that sense because it's oftentimes not a part of the migration of the HTML content into that system. But like you said, as long as forethought and planning is taken into consideration and you determine where the styling is going to come from, whether you want it on the source Flare project side or coming from the system that the Flare content is ultimately embedded within, either way is going to work. It's just a matter of understanding which method you're going to choose, I'd imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And prioritization of the CSS sheets was one of our bigger fears of using the CSS from Flare and pushing it up to the site. We didn't want to risk the CSS sheet that we created in Flare becoming deprioritized and some other styling built into Desk overruling it. So that's why we did all our editing directly in Desk.
Yeah, and this is a good one that I think relates to a lot of the groundwork that you initially had set up and in your research and trying to figure out how you wanted to go about this. You talk about getting in that web-first mindset, and that's a great position to be in when you're really looking to maximize the potential that you have with a specific type of channel that you can push to with Flare, like the HTML5 target. But when you talk about that web-first mindset, does that imply that you also have that mobile-first kind of mindset, and that it's not just the web as in a browser, but also, on the mobile side? And I actually don't know for sure. I have not looked at your site on a mobile device or on a pad or anything like that. But how did you come about thinking about the mobile world, especially because in the world that you do play in at OverDrive with the mobile devices and ebook readers, and that kind of being the core infrastructure that's in place for ingesting the content that you do distribute? How did mobile play a part into that web-first mindset, and then how do you go about testing this site in that web manner?
That's a great question. We absolutely were thinking about mobile. A lot of companies have this mobile-first mentality, but I don't think that's entirely accurate. For us, it was more of a any screen size mentality. We wanted our website to look good, small, big, whatever. And that's one of the reasons we wanted that HTML5 and CSS3 capability to make a fully responsive site. Ours is built on Foundation, which is what's the word I'm looking for here? A responsive design framework, sort of like Bootstrap, which is just a competing product. And if you resize the window, it goes into mobile mode. So you can see everything shrinks, these stack, and these stack. But additionally, we get this menu here, which still allows you to navigate the site. So if you want to go to one of these things, you still can. All the videos, all of that still works, and this is how it will look on a phone or tablet. As far as testing is concerned, we apparently there's a bug in Chrome right now. Sorry about that. As far as testing is concerned, we basically got a whole bunch of mobile devices and tested it on all of them. And we try to get a good range. So, for instance, with Android, there's still numbers just came in. I believe it's under 10% now of users that are still using Android 2.3, but that's still a lot of people. And as Jose said, we have mobile apps and things like that, and a lot of our audience does their reading and borrowing of ebooks on their devices. So we needed to test Android 2.3, Android 4.0, Android 4.4. All these things needed to be tested. We needed to test iOS, both on phones and tablets and things like that. Windows 8, all that stuff got tested to make sure that the website would work. So it's a lot of work, in other words. So when I mentioned having a team, I should have also mentioned our excellent QA team chipping in, and they did a lot of really good work on this site. But we had a team of individuals with a whole army of devices doing work on this.
Great. And when you're trying to cover such a large volume of devices like your business does have to fulfill, it's great to have a team like that, because it is a lot of work, and especially when you're dealing with even different permutations of OS versions, like you mentioned with Android. People don't realize that there is a lot of inconsistencies with different versions that you can encounter. So,
right.
Great
job there. Our QA guys are invaluable there.
Yeah. All right. I think we have time for one more question. Are Flare features? And I know the answer to this, but I want to hear about how you incorporated these elements, or how you did not incorporate these elements. But how did you handle Flare features such as conditional text, snippets, and variables throughout the Flare project? The single sourcing fundamentals that you can take advantage of with Flare. I assume that you encountered them, obviously, but how did you use them for your content?
Well, that's a mildly complex answer. I'll try to keep it short. The At first we had, when we first created the Flare project, I think we had around 800 articles to import that were Word documents, right? So when we first did that, we didn't bother creating snippets and things like that because we just wanted to get the content into Flare. Now, however, we're starting to use snippets and things like that, and we want to greatly broaden our use of them because they're absolutely excellent features that we really, really want to take advantage of. The nice thing about grabbing all of the content from the published directory is that when Flare compiles a project that has snippets and things like that in it, it comes out just as standard HTML. There's no special snippet code that references some file somewhere. It's just a full document. So if you have a paragraph that's a snippet and you go to publish, it's going to just show up as a regular paragraph in the output so that web browsers and stuff like that can read it. And because we're pulling from that output directory, because we've compiled our entire project in Flare, we can still use all of those great features. And that includes things from capture, like if we wanted to do a diagram with labels and things like that. The drop-downs, which we already use, as I showed you in these articles here. So those features are absolutely fantastic, and that's one of the reasons we picked Flare as our authoring and publishing tool.
All right, great summation there. And it is absolutely true that those single sourcing elements just pass right through as standard HTML into the output. The one exception being, and we've seen a lot of people take advantage of this for flexibility purposes, if you apply a condition tag to something like a word or a sentence and don't exclude that condition, that actually passes through to the output as an attribute.
That's true.
That you can then toggle and filter off of for display purposes, for a whole bunch of different reasons. But that's a great, that setup on the compiler side allows for a lot of flexibility when you understand what's happening on the inside. So as I always recommend people,
and we actually,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, we actually exclude, we actually actively exclude conditioned out text because we have those internal solutions. So like some of these articles might say, thank you for contacting us, we're sorry you're having trouble at the very beginning. But you don't want that in the beginning of a help article, so we condition it to be internal only, and we exclude it from our target. And that keeps our output clean in both the internal solution and the external solution because that just never even shows up in the output folder.
Yeah. All right, Quentin, why don't you pull up the last slide that we had set up with the questions, because I know that had your contact information on it as well as mine. I do want to thank everyone for joining us in today's session. This was something that we've been very excited to showcase for quite a long time, and has taken some effort to coordinate on our side just because scheduling-wise. But I do want to thank Quentin Laumann for joining us today and going through this. I hope everyone found it very valuable. My information is there. Jason Romano at MadCap Software is my email, and at MadCapJose on Twitter. And Quentin has put up his own personal email address so he doesn't get overloaded at his office. Me at QuentinLaumann.com, and then at QL22 on Twitter. So any closing words for our viewers today, Quentin?
No, just thank you for having me, and thanks to everybody for letting me talk your ears off.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Stay tuned for that link going out later today or tomorrow with the recording of the session, as well as the link to the resources and APIs referenced in today's presentation. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you again soon. Have a good day.